Esteemed colleagues and my dear students, good afternoon and welcome to today's lecture program. As you have been already conveyed, in order to celebrate Indian democratic traditions, University Grants Commission has decided to organize a series of talks under the theme India, the Mother of Democracy, in select Indian universities across India between 15th to 30th this November. Tezpur University is also one of them. As part of this initiative, our guest speaker today, Dr. Radha Gayathri of Center of Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, is going to deliver a lecture titled Corporate Bodies and Community Participation During Kakatiya Times. This session will be telecast live, as you have been told, in Tezpur University's official YouTube channel. The duration of the lecture will be around 40 minutes, which will be followed by interaction session. Now allow me to briefly introduce today's speaker, Dr. Chintalapuri Radha Gayathri is a research officer at the Center of Historical Studies in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. She was a brilliant student and was a gold medalist both in her BA and MA from Nagarjuna University and Hyderabad University respectively. Subsequently, she did her MPhil and PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University. The title of her PhD thesis was Female Healthcare in Colonial North India, Medical and Educational Interventions. She has had an abiding interest in various aspects of history of education in India, and she has widely published her research in books, book chapters, and journal papers. We are indeed happy to have her as the speaker of today's lecture on corporate bodies and community participation during Kakatiya times. While we look forward to her deliberation, I would like to request Dr. Gayathri to kindly consider the fact that many of our participants today in this lecture do not have any background in history, being from, most of them are hailing from science and technology, let alone Kakatiya history. So it will be very useful and kind of you if you give them a brief introduction of their Kakatiya kingdom. And with these words, I welcome all of you on behalf of Tezpur University community and invite you, Dr. Gayathri, to deliver your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Professor Sharma. In fact, before starting my lecture, I would like to say a few words about how this actually came about, this particular paper. Like you said, I belong to Andhra, and but somehow I came to JNU and settled here for the last 25 years, and my research has been on North India, and it's in the field of modern Indian history, particularly pertaining to women and education. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So after working for so many years in education, as you are aware, JNU is interdisciplinary, and a very informal discussion led to this whole idea about interest into the regional history. It's so much so that many a times the regional histories are found to be neglected and they don't really appear in the mainstream history. So with that understanding, we were generally having a talk, and it was like, coming from Andhra, what about your regional history? What is your notion, and why don't you write something on regional history? And that really made me to think about going back to my roots once again. And obviously, being the historian, I wanted to go back and see the history and its significance and the uniqueness of the history of that area and all. So I started working on this particular paper, which is on the Kakatiya period, which is a very, very important dynasty of medieval Andhra. And it was still in the process of, like, I'm still working on it. It's a working paper, but somehow the findings were found to be very, very interesting, and it led to be it became a part of the volume which is being brought out by the Indian Council of Historical Research. And eventually that led to the UGC's thing that I would be a part of the this whole lecture series because they found it very fascinating. So that's how about this paper came about, and still working paper in a way. But I'm very glad that I'm able to share my findings and my particularly in this paper, my research findings with students who are also not from history background, and also to a completely different part of the country, because this often leads to uh, a sort of looking inwards and asking ourselves like what happened to our own areas and all. So in that way, I'm very glad that I'm able to present this paper in a completely different remote part of the country like Tejpur. So that is the background of this paper. Now coming to the topic, and I'm very grateful that Professor Sharma, you mentioned that this paper is going to be addressed to many of the students who are not from history background at all. So I'll try to modify and try to communicate to their understanding also. So primarily, when we are talking about democracy, you know, the term democracy means different things to many people, different people. And etymologically, democracy means rule of people, where people rule by themselves. And however, there is no, it is also a classical example of a concept where there is no consensus because of various definitions as well as what is the content. So there are so many differences of opinion about democracy itself, but the idea that, democracy is a form of governance based on some degree of popular sovereignty and collective decision making is a part which is mostly agreed upon. Like everybody agrees that having a certain kind of power to take decisions, a popular participation is a very, very important part of democracy. And in fact, it is the essence of democracy, the popular participation. Now, taking off from that platform, when we try and see it in the Indian context, it is democracy is often seen as a contrast to monarchy or autocratic rules in that way. And monarchy has been often defined in those terms, especially in the Indian context, in the theories like Oriental despotic rules and all. So when we compare to that, if we see the monarchy as it existed in the early Indian context, it was not a sort of autocratic rule because these royalties were, rule within the frame of dharma. It's a very, very old concept dating back to Buddhist traditions almost. And despite the large variances in Dharma Shastra, most of the kings were expected to rule within the binding of dharmas, which is aimed at certain principles of welfare of the people. And the king and his subjects both were expected to adhere to the rules of dharma for administration as well as civil conduct. In fact, dharma was not limited to royalty, and even every section of the society had dharma. Like we had jati dharma, varna dharma, shreni dharma, and all. So it's not a one concept, but it is a varied concept pertaining to different sections of people. For example, Gautama Dharma Shastra of 15th century BC, it states that the cultivators, traders, herdsmen, money lenders, artisans, everybody had authority to lay down rules for their own respective classes. And the king was to consult these representatives while dealing with the matters relating to them. So there are different layers of dharmas in the society, and the rule of the royalty was within this frame of dharma. Of course, there is always this notion of being a normative text. How far it was actually, implemented or executed, that needs to be studied separately. But by and large, it is understood by all the historians that Indian monarchy is very, very different from the Western notions of monarchy, because there was this particular concept of dharma, which was, a guiding principle of the governance in Indian context. Now, coming to the present paper, in this paper, I'm trying to see the functioning of various corporate bodies, that is primarily the samayas, which are the village councils, and the guilds, the mercantile guilds, during the Kakatiya period from the epigraphical sources, that is the inscriptional sources only. I couldn't relate so much to the primary sources of the Telugu text and the classical text of those periods. which is the second part of my research, which needs to be extended a little more. But I want to mention here that we do have a lot of inscriptional evidences belonging to this period, and all of them throw light on a very, very vibrant village level corporate life, where people organize themselves into self-governing corporate bodies on the basis of their caste, profession, religion, cult, trade, and they were all functioning as centers of power within themselves at local levels and sometimes even regional levels. Now, this is a very beautiful aspect because within the umbrella of monarchy state, where the king is the head, king is on the top of the power, we see different layers and levels of powers existing simultaneously. And these centers of power had their own autonomy to decide for their own concerning to their classes and their sections of people. That is why I found it very, very fascinating. Now, active community participation and autonomy of these institutions, in fact, reflect a certain degree of practice of democratic principles in medieval Andhra Pradesh. So this is the whole take of my paper. What is the democratic principles, and in what way can we see these democratic principles in the Kakatiya period? Now, coming to epigraphical sources, these are very limited kind of sources, one kind of a source. But the interesting thing about the study of epigraphs of Kakatiya period is that for the first time we have almost like 2,500 plus inscriptions pertaining to this particular dynastic group, and they're all in Telugu language and Telugu script for the first time. The other significant part is that out of these 2,500 plus inscriptions, 70% of them are not royal inscriptions or the feudatory inscriptions. They are inscriptions of the common people like Setkis, Boyas, Pragadas, even untitled men and women. So they are like a popular voice or popular representations of the time. And the other part is that though these inscriptions pertain to a lot of donations to the temple and their endowment grants and all, they are also reflective of the idea of horizontal and vertical network of administration and state governance, where different social groups are trying to be joining to the vertical levels of political umbrella of the Kakatiya, and horizontal also, where they are trying to create networks of economies, because the grants actually per se doesn't mean anything, but in actual execution they mean a lot of economic activity, because the grants are often associated with the artisanal groups of craftsmen or oil minners when they light the lamps and all. So it's a very, very interrelated activity of different communities in the society. So it was a horizontal network into the economic activity of the period also. That is the reason why we take these epigraphical sources. Now, coming to the Kakatiya era itself, the significance of Kakatiyas is that it's just for the first time under the Kakatiya rule. In fact, it's the greatest epoch in the medieval Andhra Pradesh history, because it is the Kakatiyas who have actually brought in and unified the Telugu-speaking people with the literature, linguistic and geopolitical identity. All three major sections of Andhra Pradesh. I'm not talking about the current Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, but I'm talking about the Telugu-speaking areas of Rayalaseema, Telangana, and the coastal area. So these three tracts of lands were brought together under one umbrella for the first time. And the very fact that the Telugu inscriptions were used along with the Telugu language, it's like creating an identity. And this is what continued for a very, very long time, till the modern times, so what you call the Telugu identity. So that is the significance of the inscriptions as well as the Kakatiya ruler. And the other important part or the contribution of the Kakatiyas is that they have contributed a lot in terms of religion, society, art, architecture, and all. There was a vibrant trade during this period through seaports like Madanapalli, where there were inscriptions protecting the traders coming from other parts of the world. There are references of Marco Polo's writings where he talks about a lot of trade exchange and prosperous towns of Warangal and all. And we also have a very, very important contributions of Kakatiyas is that the irrigation facilities, and the irrigation was promoted in a major way because the core area of Kakatiyas was Telangana, which is a very uphill and dry area. So to promote agriculture base over there, a lot of work has been done towards digging new tanks and laying irrigation channels and all. And I'm happy to share that some of them exist to this day. Like they've been serving for last 700, 800 years till now. So that is the kind of contributions that Kakatiyas have made to Andhra history. So they are considered with great appreciation. Now, there are certain historical debates of the period, but I'm not going into the historical and historiographical aspects of it because that's like a purely historian's craft, which might be difficult for the people to understand. But it's basically debates about the medieval period of the history where we have the two great empires, and the period in between is considered as a dark age traditionally. But now it is no more accepted because, like I said, the understanding of regional histories, the rise of the local kingdoms is seen something as not a dark age, but it is a prosperous period in the regional terms. So most of the state societies have emerged from within integration and not a sort of a political crisis or a dark age. So there are certain debates on it, certain models which have been expressed by the historian. Now, by and large, if we see the state structure, because I'm talking about democracy, I'm talking about political participation, but we are talking about a kingdom and a monarchy. So within this monarchy, if we see, there's a large administrative structure, in fact, because the kingdom definitely is divided into various provinces. And these provinces are known as nadus, the major provinces, and the intermediary ones are called as talas, and the lowest unit is the uru. Uru in Telugu actually means a village. So the basic unit is village. So Stala can have about 20 to 25 villages, and Nadu is a huge province. And most of these nadus provinces were under the hereditary chiefs, what we call feudatories or samanta rulers. And these samanta rulers are usually big and small, and who pledge their allegiance to the king through tribute payments, marriage alliances, and supporting military forces from at the times of need. So there was a lot of display of obligation in permanent, non-permanent, and non-bureaucratic ways. And most of these feudatory families were also made into provincial governors, and they were given the autonomy to rule these provinces in a way. Now, what is interesting is that some of these provincial heads or the earlier Samanta rulers, like the Telugu Chodas, the Pallavas of Guntur, Yadavas of Addanki, or the Chalukyas of Pitapuram, these are all the secondary families of the earlier huge empires of the South India. So they were the traditional lords, and they controlled a lot of power within their own land. So definitely the dynamics were such that whenever the ruler had exerted a lot of power, they were under control, but given a chance, they would always rebel and declare their independence. So there are multi-layers of administration over here. The interesting fact about Kakatiyas is that they have never asserted their imperial supremacy, and they allowed their subordinate chiefs and kings to rule their traditional land. In fact, a lot of inscriptions mentioned, in fact, these Kakatiya rulers have never taken titles which are very grand, like Rajadiraja, Parama Maheshwara. These grand titles of declaring themselves as emperor. They always took titles of Mandaleshwara or Mahamandaleshwara, at most Maharaja. On the contrary, their own subordinates, the Samantas, they have often taken very huge titles like Maharajadiraja. The king, the emperor, the Kakatiya king is taking a title of Mandaleshwara, but their own provincial governors were taking the titles of Maharajadiraja. So it clearly shows that Kakatiyas have really never asserted their sovereignty, and they always behave like the Mandaleshwaras only. In fact, they themselves were feudatories to the Rashtrakutas and Chalukyas of Kalyani earlier. before they became independent rulers of Andhra Pradesh. So this is one very fascinating aspect. And in fact, there are certain inscriptions in the later period of Kakatiya where the provincial chiefs have not even mentioned the name of the ruler. They're like, it's like completely ignoring them. So it shows like even though it is monarchy, how far the sovereignty is acknowledged itself is one aspect. And if you see the territorial administration itself, the administrative units, like I mentioned, there are villages, but there are also officials along with the provincial governors. They are known as Bhattara Niyoga. There are 72 officials which have been mentioned. But unfortunately, we don't really have any source of that period which tells us all the 72 official designations. It only mentions as Bahattara Niyogi, Bahattara Niyogadipati, that is the overall head of all these 72 officers, some important ministers and commander-in-chiefs were designated this position. But we really don't have any records of in what way they were functioning or what were the 72 official positions and all. But we do have a mention of the same kind of Bahattara Niyogis to the temples. So there was same kind of officials, set of officials even associated with the temple. And this is a very, very interesting aspect of medieval South India, especially in the Chola kingdom, where the king or the ruler, in fact, completely surrenders himself to the Lord, and he expects that the people would surrender himself. That's why we have this unique system in South India where the temple establishment is equated to the palace of the king. And also the king, whatever ceremonies were associated with the king are performed to the god in the temple. So it's almost like a parallel establishment. Even the king himself considers himself follower or subordinate of the god. So temple as an institution has a very, very interesting parallel with the emperor and the political structures of South India. So this is at the like the state level structures, but now my focus is on the village administration, which is the main area of my study. Villages are two types, in fact. One are the tax-paying villages, the Agrahara villages, what we call Aingara villages, and we have the other set of villages which were like tax-free. And these were usually the donations given to the Brahmins or the villages given to the temples. So they are known as the Brahmadeya villages or Devadaya villages. And both these villages were under the administration of the Kakatiya rulers. But if we see the actual functioning of these villages, that is what where we see the popular participation or the community participation in the administration, and their own autonomy are defined in this. So we do have, in fact, the village administration is not something very new to Andhra Pradesh. We do have references of the villages coming together as a unit, villages having village headmen or the association at the village market level are all mentioned in the Battipolu inscriptions. This is like dating back to 2nd, 3rd century BC. This is a donative inscription belonging to the Buddhist period in Andhra Pradesh. So as early as 3rd century BC, we have clear mentions of corporate bodies in the village level and how people came together for administration. They have references of the village headman. There are references of a marketplace, a market association, and everything. So somehow this kind of tradition has persisted, and by the time the Kakatiyas established their rule in Andhra Pradesh, we see that at the village level there is the functioning of a village council. Now these village council system, we see that different communities from the villages form together into a body known as Samaya. And the Samaya is a term which is used in the inscriptions and the text both for the village councils, for the caste groups, and sometimes as a synonym even to the mercantile groups. But by and large, Samayas are the village councils. And in the villages, like the non-tax paying one, the tax-free ones, like the donated ones to the Brahmins and the temples, there are organizations called as Mahajanlu. Mahajanlu literally means the respected elder men of the villages, often associated with the learned men, and they are seen as a council. Now, who are the people who constituted the Samaya? The Samayas constituted, the terms used as are Ashtadasa Prajalu, that is 18 groups of people. And these 18 groups of people are basically 18 different castes which were existing in the villages at that time. We also have other names like Padunenimidi Jatula Prajalu, Padunenimidi Samayala Varu, Samasta Samaya. Means Samasta means all the Samayas. Padunenimidi means 18. So there is reference of 18 castes in the village, and all these people together form the members of the Samaya. So to mention the 18 Samayas quickly, I'm not using the Telugu terminology, I'm using the English one. They are like the Brahmins, the priests, traders, cultivators, oil mongers, weavers, shepherds, smiths, courtesans, carpenters, potters, tailors, shoemakers, washermen, barbers, toddy tappers, hunters, and blacksmiths. So these are the 18 castes, and all the 18 castes together were known as the Samayas. That is the village council. And each of these village councils again had the leaders, the Nayakulu or Buri Nayakulu, that is the leader of the villages. And these were all elected within the body. These Samayas were internally again governed by their own customs and codes of laws known as Samayachara. Any member who is violating them is known as Samaya Drohi, and he was punished with excommunication. So clearly we see that there is a different set of rules and customs and laws associated with the village level leaders. Now, some of these leaders who were very, very influential, found to be influential, especially the village headmen and all, sometimes were taken into bureaucracy, which I'll come little later. Now, within the village council again, that is the whole corpus of the village, the whole populace of the village, there is a village headman and all. What is interesting is there is also another set of officials who were working along with them and who were facilitating or who were actually serving the village council. These are known as Ayagars. Now, Ayagars are 12 in number. They varied from village to village depending upon the village size, depending upon the economy and everything. So ideally there were 12 in number, and sometimes we find in small villages 2-3 functions of the Ayagars were performed by one single person. And these Ayagars, primary of them were Karanam. He's the village accountant, you can say, or he's the record keeper basically. Peddakapu, or the main cultivator. You had the Talari, who is the policeman. You have the Pujari. We had the carpenter, potter, barber, shoemaker, etc. And these were all identified as people who will be performing their service to the village council. And they were all paid. They are called as Ayagars because Ayam actually means a measure. And they were given certain land as payment for their services. Out of these 12, Karanam, that is the record keeper or the scribe, Peddakapu, who is the main cultivator, and the policeman, 3 of them were under the administration of the state. They received their salaries from the state. But other 3 members who were serving the state as state representatives at the village level, even they received a portion of the grain from the villages as their payment. So there is a clear-cut mechanism where you see that people are being elected by the village councils and they were appointed as officials to serve the villages. And within the tax-free villages, rather we see that the record keeper, the policeman and all are not accountable to the state, but they're accountable to the village headmen and the village elders only. All these Samayas had a dharma called as Samaya Dharma. We do have example of Vaishya Puranam, which is basically a Puran of the Vaishya community, the trading community, the Banya caste, what we call. And they clearly mention about the dharma of the Samaya. So you have the Dharma Sabhas being established, the Samaya Sabhas being established, and they had a person known as Samaya Mantri, who was in charge of the Samaya Dharma and the protector of the Dharma. Now, quickly trying to see the administrative, judicial, and the fiscal powers, which actually are the domain of the state administration, but how or what degree of autonomy did the villages enjoy in these three aspects. The first and the foremost is, of course, the administrative powers. Like they had, the village council were the authority to decide about matters, anything which are pertaining to the village. So much so that any even higher official or the royal representatives had to request or execute things in the village only through these village councils. So we do have a lot of inscriptional evidences here. And there are a few statements which I would like to read out, which are reflective and clear indicative of the idea of the autonomy of the villages. The statement goes like, we the assembly, if we fail in fulfilling the contract, we shall incur all the sins committed between the Ganges and Cape Comorin. We the assembly of this town order that all the oil mills existing in this village shall set up on this land a portion of oil towards maintaining a lamp in the temple. We, the 18 castes, have assembled together and made this gift of land to a particular temple. We, the men of the Nadu, the villagers, and the heads of assemblies agreed to give the god a certain amount of gold. Like these kinds of declarations in the inscription shows that they had a considerable amount of power in administering the village matter. And we have clear-cut examples. There are a lot of inscriptional evidences which shows how the provincial governors are requesting the village council members, the village heads, or even the 18 caste members, even to donate a piece of land or make a donation towards a temple which is existing in that particular village. And there are also references to, permission being sought, like from the Prabhu Mukhya, Grama Nayaka, and his, they're one by one. I'm not going in detail, but we do have enough inscriptional evidences to clearly show that there was a village headman and their permission was in fact taken in matters pertaining to the village, even by the higher official. Now, there were also reference to different kinds of committees which were existing in the village councils. Especially, we have the council of Panchmavarna, who were the tax collectors. And there's this beautiful description of Machilipatnam, which tells about young men who are being very eloquent in the council meetings are often elected as the Panchmavarna members, which is committee of 5 members and all, and how they are honored with this membership. Then we have a wonderful description about one of the provincial governors representative approaches the village members of 3 villages. In fact, he requests them all to a Sabha Mandapa, and the description goes like, Varika Dandamu Petti Vinnapam Chesiti, means like he is holding his hands and requesting with a bowed head to all the gathered members of the village that he is intending to make a donation and they should permit him and his Mandaleshwara to execute that donation. And then it also goes on to mention that all the people, the Ashesha Praja of the assemblies of these 3 villages, have passed an anati, means passed an order imposing a tax on all the kapus, and goes on to say that anyone who is defying this order will accrue great sin. So on the request of the representative of the provincial governor, the villages are passing in fact the order that certain sections of the society will now contribute along with the Mandaleshwara's donation towards the temple, and that anyone who is defying this order is going to get a sin. Like it is trying to bind this order on the people with an ideological sanction. And we also have the other kinds of inscriptions which explain in detail these kind of power enjoyed by the village council. So clearly we see that even though the village is the basic unit in a monarchy, or village council is a body functioning within the umbrella of Kakatiya emperor rule, we see that they had still a lot of autonomy which they have enjoyed in administrative matters. Similarly, when it comes to the matters of fiscal autonomy, ideally or technically imposing or remitting a tax or reduction of a tax all pertains is seen as the authority or power of the state and not of the individual. But we see that the village councils in the Kakatiya period have enjoyed great autonomy in imposing taxes or reducing the taxes or even diverting a part of the tax towards certain donations and payments. And the kind of taxes mentioned over here, which are being used by the village council, are like we have tax on the agriculture, duties which are payable on buildings, duties collected at the port, toll taxes, and even the income of the village. So these are kinds of taxes which a portion of it or the whole tax of it has been donated or given away by the village council. So these are all the income of the state. But the village council is actually controlling like how much is collected and how much is paid to the state and everything. What is interesting is even the mention of a marriage fee in a Mahajanulu village, in a Devadaya village, is actually diverted towards a payment. And this was the decision of the Mahajanulu of that particular village. Now we also have cases of tax completely being exempted out because it is a decision of the village council. We have references of tax from 3-4 villages being exempted on the fishermen community where they were said not to pay taxes. Similarly, we have examples on the exemption of tax on the oil mill. Because if we read the whole inscription, we see that these particular exemptions are towards a payment of a person who has worked for the village or a person who has worked for the temple, or in this way it is a sort of payment is also done in this. So besides the maintenance or collection or payment of these taxes, we also see that the village councils have undertaken a lot of work like public works of construction of maintenance of tanks, maintenance of irrigation channels, maintenance of food houses known as satras, even water. We call in Andhra Chalivendram because especially in summer it is a very hot zone. We have these houses where they just give water, so drinking water to people. So they are known as Chalivendrans, and we have references of Chalivendrans being established in Kakatiya period, and these were all done free of cost, and these were all run by the village councils. And the very important, as of course they did other jobs as being the trustees of certain endowments, being the executioners of certain endowments and all. I found 2 very interesting inscriptions of this period where it is a clear indication that the village council overrided or they checked the transgression of the higher officials. One particular inscription actually talks about a high officer, a provincial governor, who has actually, imposed tax on the village. So this inscription belongs to 1314. And it is from the Guntur region. It talks about, and it is not, let me correct myself. It is actually an inscription, crafted out on the mandapa of a temple. It's in a very public place. And it mentions that this particular officer has put taxes on the villagers, and these are undue taxes, and we refuse to pay these taxes. And later this matter was referred to the king, and they were exempted from this particular tax. And the villagers, rather than taking the money, actually remitted out the money as a donation to the temple for the merit of their king. And it also goes on to mention that this kind of acts of imposing undue taxes is wrong, and any person who does it will accrue a sin. It is like a public warning to the future officials that you are not expected to impose these kind of undue taxes on people. So it's almost like reprimanding and scolding in a high official way publicly by a village headman, in fact, village heads of a particular. area. Now, the other interesting fact is about a similar kind. This is also an inscription which mentions that an appeal has been made to the king, stating that the tax-free village, from the tax-free village, one of the local kings was collecting taxes, and this is against the vritti dharma. It is against the dharma of the village. So they made an appeal, and the king has listened to them and stopped these taxes. So we see clearly that within the given social system, the state structure, the village councils never hesitated to approach the king and appeal to him for transgression by the administrative authorities. Now, coming to how genuine these village councils were there and how far there is a total welfare state notion is a complete matter of investigation altogether. But given the kind of sources and looking at the kind of evidences I found, I went on to research on the autonomies enjoyed by the people, considering the samyas are representative of all sections of people. Now, quickly coming to the judicial powers, this is another interesting fact, because ideally, the judicial authority, having a judicial authority entails having power to interpret and decide on the matters of law. And this is clearly the prerogative of the state or the ruler. What kind of punishment should be given or what kind of settlements are to be made is prerogative of the ruler. But here in Kakatiya Empire, we see that the village councils were the arbitrators of law for all the issues pertaining to the village, even at two levels, disputes between different villages. So they were acting as witnesses. The village council settled the matters, all the disputes pertaining to land disputes or distribution of waters and everything. I'll refer to two particular disputes which actually highlights the procedure of the judicial redressal during that system and the matters, what kind of matters were they dealing with. One inscription is dating to 1246. It is actually a dispute between two villages about irrigation, the water distribution from an irrigation channel. So having disputes on the river water is not something new. It is a very, very old one, in fact. So we have this fight in between two villages over the distribution irrigation of water from the irrigation channel. Now, once this matter was brought to the king in fact sends his representative to the village. This representative then invites the village heads from the nearby area, from different villages, three other different villages. So these people, all of them assembled together near the canal, and they went on to talk to these witnesses, that is the elders from the other villages. And on the witnesses from these village heads from the other villages, they decided the water or the canal belongs to who. So here we see that the arbitration is through the popular participation. It is not a decision taken by the minister alone. He is rather inviting people from the neighboring villages together, so as to be a far more fairer judgment and all. And the second inscription is very reflective of the whole procedure, because it actually talks about a dispute between two villages over garden lands. The lands were claimed by both the villages. When this dispute was brought about, the disputants actually sought the intervention of Bhimatri, who is appointed as a judicial tribunal to settle this particular dispute. The Nayakas of 7 villages, all the Nayakas and the villages were mentioned here. So people, the leaders of 7 villages and the Mahajans of one particular village were selected as judges or the jury members, and one particular Narsimha Mahamuni, he was the person who conducted the whole inquiry proceeding. After examining the records of the village, the boundary was fixed in the favor of one particular village as per the judgment of the whole tribunal. And it was decided that the offenders of the agreement will be punished by confiscating their property or expelling them from their society or depriving them of their livelihood. The judgment was signed by all the judges of the tribunal, and the king approved it. Now, if you see this particular inscription, it clearly shows that the village's opinion the neighbor's opinion, the community opinion is what is the deciding factor in all these kinds of disputes. And it is not arbitrarily given judgment where there is a due procedure where a particular person by consensus is elected as the tribunal head. There is a whole panel of judges deciding the whole discourse on it. Similarly, we have a third very important inscription again on dispute of land. In this incident also, all the villagers were gathered. The village heads have selected one particular person to draw the dispute, to walk along the border of the disputed land. It was a border dispute where the border would be. And this particular man actually asked the watchman of that particular village to walk because he is the only person who knows what exactly is the boundary line. So we see all these three inscriptions are a clear evidence of the judicial autonomy enjoyed by these three councils, by these village councils. So these examples, actually show us that the rulers of this period in settling the disputes of the people went in a very democratic principle, allowing the disputes to be settled by the people themselves. Precaution was taken, where the violation of agreement is not there, and all kinds of disputes are by and large decided by the villagers or through their elders and the elected people. A similar kind of parallel is seen in the mercantile guilds also, where they also enjoyed a lot of judicial power, lot of administrative power, and lot of fiscal power. Professor Sharma, may I ask you how much time do you have more?
Can continue for another 5-6 minutes, maybe.
Okay. So, like the mercantile guilds also, though they are like groups of professional communities, trading communities and all, they also enjoyed a similar kind of autonomy in matters pertaining to their community. And in Andhra, especially, if you see the mercantile guilds per se were meant to be, a sectarian one. The Jain community had a long, strong control of them. But in Kakatiya period, we see that most of the people have participated and they formed into guilds. So it was not pertaining to one caste or one religion also. So it was open to all who were into trading profession. Similarly, we had guilds of non-mercantile communities, like even the cultivators. And this is not like a Reddy community or a Kamma community, even like Boyas. Boyas are basically someone like a, a tribal person. Even they, if they're cultivating land, even a Brahmin, if he's cultivating land, could become the member of this cultivating groups. I would give just an example because I won't give other examples for the mercantile guilds. But the mercantile guilds enjoyed similar kind of administrative power in all matters pertaining to their mercantile groups. We had Nana Desi groups, Swadesi groups, depending on the extent of their trade links and all. What I want to focus is on two important examples of this period. One is about the grant of tax exemption, duty exemption, not tax, duty exemption on sale of certain items for a particular trader, for a particular person, in return for the fact that he has killed two people who were traitors of that particular guild. So the guild has decided to reward him through tax exemptions because he killed people who were Kamayadrohi. Similar example is also there where this particular person has killed a person who is a traitor and he was rewarded for it. What is interesting in both these inscriptions is that this inscription goes on to mention that anyone who is defying this order is defying not only the Samaya, but defying the ruler himself. So the decision of the guild is seen as a decision of the ruler also. So that is the kind of power which is being enjoyed by the mercantile guild. And of course, they also had a lot of say in the social conduct of the group, because we have a very interesting, inscription which mentions that the community of Vaishyas, they have decided on how much of amount to be exchanged in a wedding as a gift from the bride to the groom and from the groom to the bride. it also has taken a decision, especially this is of not Vaishyas, let me correct myself, it is of Telikas, basically the oil millers. The 1000 oil millers group, it is called as Telika 1000. They also had a decision on if the wife passes away, who would have the ownership of the jewels of the wife. They decide it will belong to the husband and not to the relatives. They also had the decisive power so much that when a king wanted to marry a girl from their community, they refused, saying it is against the dharma, samaya dharma. So these are the kinds of powers which were enjoyed by the mercantile community. So quickly coming to my conclusion, going back to the whole dynamics of the Kakatiyas, the guilds, the village assemblies, and the religious setups became the loci of power in the multi-centered power structure of the medieval state of Andhra in this region. And we also see that the concept of Dharmaraja is the notion where king is being a Chakravarti, but at the same time, the local bodies have a different dynamics altogether. Now, the neatest text of this particular period, along with the inscriptions, which my second portion is the text which I'm mentioning are the Niti texts. These are in contrast to the Dharma texts pertaining to the royalty, because Niti texts have emerged from the experience of the peoples, especially like the record keepers of like Karanams and all who are at the village level. So these all texts talk about Niti Vachanas, which are emerging from the practicalities of everyday lives of common people. When the inscriptional evidences of Kakatiya period are studied in the frame of Niti text of the period, what emerges is a state which is a monarchy at the effects level. Yet, at the local and the supra-local level, the corporate bodies, be it professional, caste, sectarian, economic, etc., functioned with a great degree of autonomy and were the centers of the democratic power in their own way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gayathri, and for such a fascinating presentation. And your talk gives an elaborate account of the nature of society and polity of the Kakatiyas in very simple terms, and I don't think it will be any problem for anybody to grapple with the issues that you have presented. And thank you very much. Now, I would like to ask if there are any questions, although they are not, most of our attendees are not from history background, but they may have certain questions and or comments to make. I myself see a lot of parallels of your presentation with, say, for example, the polity that we have in Assam. But of course, that it is not the time to discuss them in detail. But anyway, anybody may have any question, please put it to Dr. Gayathri. Also, let me assure you, do not go by the numbers that the screen shows. Many of our students are actually using one screen. That is why in the classrooms. So we have many more who are actually attending this lecture. Yes, anybody? Or I may, it's not exactly a question, but it's, as I said, it's so fascinating to see the parallels that we had, for example, the polity in Assam with that of the Kakatiya kingdom. And although the Kakatiya kingdom was more developed feudal system, unlike, for example, the kingdom here, which was semi-feudal, semi-tribal, especially the Ahom kingdom, if I may make mention of. And where we see similar kind of democratic principles in governance. And even before that, and in 9th century AD itself, there are stone inscriptions which actually mention of similar disputes between soldiers and the fishermen, and how the fishermen's complaints to the king actually resulted in this edict by the king, warning all our navy, the navy of the king himself, not to disturb the fisherman and to maintain the boundary which was fixed by that particular inscription scrupulously. So that kind of parallels also we do see here. But what is most striking is the kind of in terms of the democratic principles, if I may mention, is the liberal caste system, how one can become, say, warrior caste, not necessarily in terms of the Kshatriya that we mentioned, but for the Nayakas to become Kshatriyas. Not only that, the Queen Rudrama Devi, which is a kind of unique example, and how she became one of the most distinguished rulers of Kakatiya kingdom. And perhaps we may also make mention of the relationship that you have mentioned about with the vassals, and perhaps these kind of relations, this kind of democratic principles in polity, perhaps allowed them to continue as a strong kingdom for around 170 years, which is not a small time. And if I have understood you correctly, perhaps their rule made singular most important contribution towards the building of modern Telugu society. I'm not very sure, but
yes, you are correct on that.
But I have one question, which is like the irrigation played a very important role there, and you mentioned Oriental despotism in the beginning. Of course, we are not believers in Oriental despotism, but in society in Assam, in Brahmaputra Valley, we saw how irrigation played such an important role, and community played a very important role under the leadership of the state in making provisions for irrigation, in, say, for example, creating channels from the rivers to paddy fields and things like that, preparing land for wheat rice cultivation. So was it a very important, what should I say, I mean, the irrigation, was it that important that we can call, say, the Kakatiya society a hydraulic society? I mean, in terms of why I'm asking is that, say, for example, Ahom kingdom in Brahmaputra Valley, irrigation played such an important role that entire organizational hierarchy of the kingdom actually centered around irrigation, management of water, which it played a crucial role in the in the formation of the whole hierarchy of a bureaucratic hierarchy of the kingdom.
Actually, if I want to, I would like to respond to this. Like, if I have to say, like, the uniqueness of Kakatiya kingdom, ideally, if you see all the kingdoms which have emerged, or the empires which have emerged, they have been on the the major fertile river basin areas, because the huge agrarian base is actually which supports the machinery, state machinery, administrative machinery, the army and all. So having a huge agrarian base is the first and foremost rules, factors which allows for the flourishing of a state and all, empires and all. Now, the uniqueness of Kakatiya Empire is that it was not established in the fertile basins of the coastal area, but it was established in the high dry areas of Telangana.
Right.
So it didn't have an agrarian base. So, and adjacent to that, they expanded into the Rayalaseema areas, which is all forest tract and again semi-arid areas. So, the important activity of digging out these huge tanks and canals, laying out the whole irrigation channels was very, very crucial for the stability of the core in Telangana. Without that, the core would have collapsed, because the coastal areas were all Samantas who were well entrenched and established, and they were the most unstable factors in the state. So to establish the stability of the core, it was important that they have a agrarian base over there. And the forest tracts were cleared, lands were purchased. Establishing these economic networks and laying out these tanks was the very, very important act of consolidating their power in the core region of Telangana. So that is the uniqueness of the all of these agriculture irrigational works taken up by during the Kakatiya period.
Right, right. And the communities definitely played a very important role in this. Yeah, yeah. So, do you have any questions now from the participants? We are running out of time, but it seems there are no questions as such. They may have questions, but may not be asking. And anyway, thank you, Dr. Gayathri, so very much for this lively presentation. And I personally learned a lot of things. I read Kakatiya history in my school, and I still remember, of course, but Rudrama Devi is a different character that we got to know through comic books. You see, these are very, I mean, and you mention Marco Polo, and I think he had very high words about her rule, and this shows that this society was so accepting and liberal, and it's really so nice to hear you and on these important issues. And I'm sure our students and faculty alike can also draw parallel with instances, cases from Assam or other part of Northeast India. So with these words, I thank you again for this presentation. Hopefully, we will again have you among us in future, sooner than later. Thank you so much.